What does it take to go from the stars to the sidelines in Hollywood? Sometimes all it takes is one wrong move, a bit of ego, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The 1980s were packed with sci-fi TV legends who seemed untouchable until everything came crashing down. Ever wonder what really happened to those familiar faces you grew up watching? Let's pull back the curtain on careers that burned bright and then fizzled out for reasons you won't believe. Will Wheaton. Will Wheaton. Say that name to any sci-fi fan and you'll get an instant reaction. Love him or loathe him, everyone remembers Wesley Crusher from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Back in the late 80s, Weaton had it made. He was the kid genius on the bridge of the Enterprise, beaming with possibilities. But here's where the plot twist kicks in. Weaton didn't just leave the show, he practically ran from it. At the height of his fame, Weaton shocked everyone by quitting Star Trek. The world wanted answers. Some blamed the relentless bullying from fans who couldn't stand Wesley's precocious persona. Others pointed to the behind-the-scenes drama, where young Will found himself at odds with the show's producers. Truth is, he wanted more screen time, better scripts, a real shot at stardom. Hollywood, however, isn't always kind to those who demand more before they've paid their dues. What happened next? Instead of launching into blockbuster roles, Weaton found doors closing left and right. He became the poster child for what could have been. While he later found new life as a writer and pop culture commentator, his mainstream acting career never recovered its warp speed. For years, he wore the shadow of Wesley Crusher everywhere he went, sometimes joking about it, sometimes wincing when fans would bring up, "Shut up, Wesley." Wheaton's story isn't just about bad luck or tough fans. It's a classic case of Hollywood momentum lost and never quite regained. Sometimes, leaving the bridge means you end up drifting in deep space. Gil Gerard. Gil Gerard was the ultimate sci-fi action hero in the 80s. As Buck Rogers, he had the blaster, the charm, and the kind of square-jawed confidence that made every kid want to be him. For a while, Gerard was everywhere. Comic cons, TV guide covers, fan magazines. He was the future, right there on our living room screens. So what derailed this intergalactic ride? It's the classic tale of overnight fame meeting real-life challenges. Buck Rogers in the 25th century debuted with a bang, but behind the scenes, Gerard was struggling. Fame brought pressure, and pressure brought problems. He clashed with producers over the show's tone, demanding more mature storylines and more control. That rarely goes down easy in network TV land. But it wasn't just creative differences. Personal struggles started bleeding onto the set. Rumors swirled about erratic behavior, missed call times, and tough nights. It didn't take long for the suits to decide that Buck Rogers could be grounded. When the show was canceled, Gerard's phone stopped ringing. Studios remembered the arguments and the headaches, not the heroics. He tried to stage a comeback, popping up in made-for-TV movies and guest spots, but lightning didn't strike twice. The sci-fi crowd moved on. Gerard became a cautionary tale, the star who went from leading man to Hollywood footnote almost overnight. What's left is a legacy built on one unforgettable role and a lot of what-ifs. Gil Gerard soared through the galaxy, but the crash landing was rougher than anyone saw coming. Erin Gray. Erin Gray was the steel-nerved, silver-suited Wilma Deering on Buck Rogers in the 25th century. She was a rare thing in 80s sci-fi, a strong, smart female lead who didn't just play second fiddle. Fans adored her. Casting directors took notice. For a while, it looked like Erin Gray was destined for a long run in the limelight. But here's where the story takes a detour. Despite the fame Buck Rogers brought her, Hollywood had trouble seeing Gray as anything but Wilma. Typecasting is the silent killer in showbiz. When Buck Rogers ended, the roles stopped coming. She fought to break out of the spacesuit, auditioned for dramas, comedies, you name it. Still, the phones stayed mostly silent. In an industry that loves reinvention, Gray struggled to find a path forward. She landed a recurring role on Silver Spoons, but it didn't catapult her back to the top. Hollywood's obsession with youth and novelty meant the next wave of sci-fi was looking for new faces. And while Gray continued to appear at conventions and in occasional TV movies, the major parts never returned. She eventually reinvented herself as a talent agent, helping others find the success that eluded her after Buck Rogers. It's not the ending she imagined, but it's a second act built on resilience. Erin Gray's career proves that sometimes being a trailblazer isn't enough to guarantee a future in front of the camera. In Hollywood, yesterday's hero can be tomorrow's trivia question. Michael Vincent. Michael Vincent was born for iconic roles. In the 1980s, his turn as Stringfellow Hawk in Airwolf turned him into an action legend. The chopper, the shades, that icy cool, he was the guy every kid wanted to be, and every producer wanted to cast. But in Hollywood, sometimes being too wild for your own good means you crash long before the final episode. Airwolf exploded onto TV with big budgets and bigger expectations. Vincent was at the center of it all, but fame only magnified his struggles. He was notoriously hard to work with, sometimes missing shoots, sometimes causing tension on set. Whispers about behind-the-scenes drama turned into front-page stories. There were health scares, headlines about accidents, and tabloid tales that overshadowed his on-screen heroics. When Airwolf ended, Vincent should have been primed for a new wave of leading roles. Instead, his reputation as a risk started chasing him from project to project. Hollywood's memory is long when it comes to trouble. He bounced between TV movies and forgettable features, but the magic never came back. Producers didn't want the drama. Audiences moved on. Vincent's story became one of missed chances and warning signs ignored. Despite his undeniable talent and star presence, he found himself locked out of the very industry he once dominated. Years later, fans still debate whether he was doomed by circumstances or his own choices. In the end, Michael Vincent's career is a story of incredible highs and heartbreaking lows. He soared higher than most, but when he fell, there was nobody left to catch him. Richard Hatch. Richard Hatch was the heart of the original Battlestar Galactica, and he carried the role of Captain Apollo with an earnestness that made him instantly beloved. Even after the original series was canceled, Hatch kept the flame alive, fighting for years to bring Battlestar back. But what happens when your whole identity becomes wrapped up in a single role, and Hollywood doesn't want to let you move on? After Galactica's sudden end, Hatch poured his energy into the franchise, lobbying for a revival and producing fan films. He even wrote books to keep the story alive. Admirable? Sure. But in the eyes of Hollywood, it painted him as a one-trick pony. Casting directors saw Apollo, not Richard Hatch. He was so associated with the role that he had trouble convincing anyone he could play something new. Attempts to branch out met with little success. He found work in daytime dramas and the occasional low-budget movie, but the big roles never materialized. The sci-fi world was evolving, and newer, flashier shows were grabbing the spotlight. Hatch did make a return to Battlestar in the 2000s reboot, but by then, the damage to his mainstream career was done. Richard Hatch's story is bittersweet. He became a symbol for devoted fandom, but Hollywood rarely rewards actors who become too associated with one part. His journey is a reminder that sometimes loving your most famous role can mean losing out on everything else. Mark Singer. Mark Singer was the fearless Mike Donovan in the original V, a sci-fi series that burned its way into the imagination of 80s TV fans everywhere. He was rugged, likable, and just intense enough to make battling lizard aliens look believable. Singer's performance made him a household name almost overnight. But that rocket ride didn't last. After V finished its run, Singer found himself typecast as the action sci-fi guy. Casting agents wanted the same formula again and again. He landed a few memorable roles, like the Beastmaster, but Hollywood's appetite for sword-wielding heroes quickly faded. The big studios didn't see him as leading man material for mainstream dramas or comedies, and he never quite fit the mold of the new action hero emerging in the late 80s. On top of that, TV was shifting. V became a cult classic, but the opportunities for those classic hero parts dried up. Singer's attempts to transition into primetime TV dramas or break out on the big screen hit wall after wall. The curse of being too closely linked to a single genre had struck again. He kept working, mostly in TV guest spots, direct-to-video films, and the occasional reunion special, but the offers for anything high-profile just weren't coming. Instead of becoming a permanent fixture in pop culture, Singer faded into nostalgia territory, his best years forever frozen in the glow of 80s sci-fi. Mark Singer's story is a warning to every rising TV star. Sometimes, the role that makes you can also box you in so tightly that nobody remembers what else you can do. Lance Guest. Lance Guest looked like the next big thing after starring in The Last Starfighter. He had that everyman charm, the perfect underdog energy, and a winning smile that made sci-fi fans root for him. Guest's leap from a cult film favorite to TV was supposed to be the stuff of Hollywood legend. Instead, it turned out to be a cautionary tale. After The Last Starfighter, Guest landed a series of TV guest spots and a starring role in a short-lived Starfighter pilot. But Hollywood had a habit of eating its young, especially those who didn't fit neatly into any one category. Guest wasn't macho enough for the new era of pumped-up action heroes, and his boyish charisma couldn't compete with the moody anti-heroes who started dominating prime time. As the roles dried up, Guest found himself stuck in a loop of auditions for projects that never got off the ground. He took parts in soap operas, made-for-TV movies, and the odd indie film, but nothing matched his early promise. By the late 80s, casting directors seemed to forget he was even an option. Guest didn't flame out spectacularly. He just faded away, one missed opportunity at a time. Fans still remember him fondly, but Hollywood barely remembers him at all. The lesson? Sometimes being almost famous is even tougher than being a total unknown. Lance Guest's career reminds us that, in show business, a single breakthrough isn't always enough. Sometimes the next level is just out of reach, and the industry moves on without you. Howard Hessman. Howard Hessman wasn't your typical sci-fi leading man, but he was a fixture on 80s TV thanks to roles in shows like WKRP in Cincinnati, and later, Head of the Class. Hessman's quirky, quick-witted style made him a fan favorite, especially when he dipped his toes into science fiction and fantasy guest spots. He was the cool teacher everyone wanted, the rebel who didn't play by the rules. But cool doesn't always last forever. At the height of his popularity, Hessman left Head of the Class to chase other creative projects. It was a gutsy move, but not a wise one. Hollywood is a tough place for mid-career reinvention, and the doors don't always stay open when you walk out of a hit show. Instead of launching into a string of new successes, Hessman found himself lost in a sea of failed pilots, short-lived sitcoms, and bit parts. What made it worse was his reputation for being a little too honest in interviews and on set. Hessman wasn't shy about speaking his mind, and that didn't always sit well with producers or network execs. It didn't take long before the offers dried up, and he was replaced on Head of the Class by a completely different character. Hessman's fall from grace is a reminder that even beloved TV icons can't always call their own shots. Sometimes the industry only loves you when you play by its rules. He made people laugh, but when he gambled on a second act, the house won. Howard Hessman became another cautionary tale. If you're lucky enough to find your place in TV history, hang on tight because the ride can end in a flash. Katherine Mary Stewart. Katherine Mary Stewart owned the 80s in the eyes of sci-fi and fantasy fans. Whether it was as Maggie in The Last Starfighter or as the fierce heroine in Night of the Comet, she was everywhere. Stewart looked like the next A-list starlet, versatile, charming, and totally at home fighting aliens or outrunning the apocalypse. So why did her career stall when it should have soared? The answer is a mix of typecasting and timing. Stewart was so convincing as the smart, gutsy sci-fi girl that casting directors couldn't picture her doing anything else. When the big-budget genre projects dried up, so did the high-profile auditions. Hollywood in the late 80s and early 90s was all about the next new thing, and Stewart found herself squeezed out by a new wave of younger, untested faces. She kept busy with TV movies, indie projects, and a steady stream of convention appearances, but the A-list roles never came calling again. Unlike some of her peers, Stewart didn't crash out dramatically. She just faded from the spotlight, her career slowly cooling instead of burning out in a blaze. Fans still show up for her at sci-fi and horror conventions, eager to reminisce about the good old days. Stewart embraced her legacy, but Hollywood never gave her a real second act. Her story is a classic case of what happens when Hollywood's attention span runs out. Katherine Mary Stewart remains a cult icon, but she's proof that sometimes talent and timing just don't sync up. Bruce Boxlightener. Bruce Boxlightener is a name every sci-fi geek knows, thanks to his starring roles as Alan Bradley and Tron in Tron and as John Sheridan in Babylon 5. He had the looks, the presence, and the credibility to command starships or virtual worlds alike. In the early 80s, Boxlightener looked unstoppable. Then the unthinkable happened. Hollywood moved on, and he was left scrambling. After Tron, Boxlightener tried to keep his momentum going with a mix of TV movies and recurring roles. He found success with Scarecrow and Mrs. King and became a fixture at fan conventions, but the high-profile offers kept shrinking. When Babylon 5 ended, the industry didn't know what to do with him. He was either too sci-fi or not current enough for new projects. Some say Boxlightener's loyalty to genre TV boxed him in. He became that guy you called for a legacy cameo, but rarely a headliner. Meanwhile, younger actors and flashier special effects were taking over the roles he used to dominate. Boxlightener's resume stayed full, but the parts got smaller and the spotlight dimmed. Through it all, Boxlightener never badmouthed the business. He leaned into his sci-fi fame, embracing fans and conventions with genuine enthusiasm. But it's hard to ignore how quickly Hollywood shuffled him off to the nostalgia circuit. The business that once made him a household name now seemed to have a short memory. Bruce Boxleitner's career arc proves that even the most iconic sci-fi actors can get swept aside when the winds of Hollywood change. He didn't disappear, but the roles that made him famous sure did. So, what's the real lesson from these sci-fi stars who went from prime time to punchline? In Hollywood, the future is never guaranteed. One hit can become a career trap, and one wrong move can end it all. Now it's your turn. Which forgotten 80s star did we miss? Who do you think deserved a second shot? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that subscribe button, and let's keep these stories alive for a new generation of fans.